If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. I took a gap semester a couple of years ago and decided that I should take a road trip with a buddy who was also taking a semester off from school. We are from the Midwest and planned our trip to take a big circle from Ohio to LA up to Portland and then back home. We're outdoorsy guys, so we knew we were trying to hit to some wilderness along the way. So we're about a month into the trip and leaving Portland, where we were taking a break from camping every night while on the road, itching to get back on the road and into the wilderness. My buddy finds a hike that looks interesting. It was an abandoned railroad about 2 miles east of Portland. He had found the GPS coordinates on some site and said it was meant to be really cool with a couple of tunnels and a massive test bridge. Sounds cool, I'm in. So I drive my Volvo station wagon towards the coordinate. If you've never been to Oregon, it's beautiful. Foggy, never-ending views like thick pine forests. The type of place that you can barely see 20 feet in any direction because how dense the trees are. For the last hour or so of this 2-hour drive, we are driving on logging roads. Haven't passed a single car or seen any life since turning off a rural highway. It's creepy. Endless dark forest for hours. Stop. I hit the brakes. My buddy is squinting at his phone. Looks like we're at the coordinate. I have pulled to the side of the one lane and park. Dense trees surround us. I can see up ahead that there's a linear gap in a canopy. I guess that's a railroad. We hop out of the car and I unload my day pack with my camera, headlamp, water, and pepper spray and knife. After a second thought, I put the knife in my pocket. The railroad has been abandoned for 50 years. This means that while you can still see the tracks while standing on them, thick brush has filled the entire sweep that is typically cleared on either side of the tracks. This has been nearly filled in, except for a foot-wide path that has been maintained by deer, bear, and elk. And maybe some humans. I noticed my buddy is also looking at a private property sign that's fading into a nearby tree. He looks at me, and I shrug. We begin walking. The tracks are dead straight. This means that we can see a couple of 100 yards down the center of this green tunnel of vegetation. It's as though I'm in a very narrow alleyway that never ends. I can hardly see 10 feet in front of me too. It's winding a bit. Now honestly, it's a boring hike considering there's no view and it's dead straight at times. But we knew the tunnel was up ahead, so we keep going. I keep myself busy, trying to pace my stride with each railroad tie, step after step. We walk about 3 miles away from the car into the woods. Suddenly, I stop though, and my buddy bumps into my backpack. I had just looked up from my feet and was staring into a looming tunnel in front of us, covered in moss, and the entrance surrounded a black hole that went right into a mountainside. Again, we shrug, turn on our headlamps and begin moving again. Graffiti covered what wasn't covered with moss, and moss was covering the other areas. Our headlamps dimly lit walls covered in fairly creepy graffiti. I said eye to eye of a 20-foot mummy. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, it's so dark. We can't see the end of the tunnel. Drips of water are echoing around us. My buddy and I quickly walk down the tracks. I have my knife out now. I'm relieved to get out, From the exit of the tunnel, I could already see a massive gorge up ahead. The tracks went across a wooden bridge that screamed PNW. It's easy to forget the creepiness of the tunnel, and I looked forward to busting out my camera. Once I set off on the bridge, I realised the danger of crossing something that hadn't been maintained in 50 or so years. The wood was clearly aged, and in some places rotten, but the view is incredible. We balanced on the steel tracks and walked to the centre of the tessile, where we could see a river about 500 feet below. Horrible logins guard the mountainside. I noticed where the boards had been broken, and I hope nobody fallen. Instead of turning back after getting some good shots, we keep going. The sun was starting to loom at an angle and was blocked by the steep mountains around us. We quickly walk off the bridge and back into our green tunnel. For some reason, I start having second thoughts. I don't know why this come to me now, but I slowed my pace and started thinking, how would I ask my buddy to turn around? Before I was going to turn around and ask Nate, I glanced up ahead at the tracks and stared directly into somebody's eyes 200 yards ahead. I stop in my tracks. I feel a cold rush in my hands and head. The person staring at me has also stopped. I see another man's head poke around. There's two of them. I whisper to Nate. Slowly, we start walking around the tunnel towards the men. As we get closer, I walk faster out of fear. Bouncing off of the guy's chest is a large bush knife. He has filthy clothes, long matted hair, and has not broken eye contact. A revolver is chucked into his pants and he has a hunting rifle with a magazine. At this point, it's too late to run. I realise that my buddy and I are going to have to squeeze by these men on the narrow gap between the tracks. The brush is pulling at my sleeves on either side. How's it going? I nervously ask as I squeeze by them, avoiding eye contact. I count 4 guns in the stench of body odour. I'm unsettled by the way these guys look, and I got a feeling that I've never felt around anyone else before. Then say nothing and push past us. I kept hurrying away, and before I know, they're out of sight again. When I look behind me and past Nate, and we both look at each other. After walking silently for another 10 minutes, we stop. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't want to walk in deeper towards the creepy dudes again. Suddenly, loud moaning and shrieking starts coming from the dense woods off to the side. Sounds like it's 100 yards away. It doesn't sound fully human. I know the irony of this. We bolt back towards the cars. I'm not a runner, but we ran over to the bridge through the tunnel and through the endless green that surrounds us. Finally, I see the logging road up ahead where our car is parked. I stop running when I hear a truck idling. I can start to see it through the brush. A big old F-350 lift pickup truck idling behind my car. I now see both the men staring at us, waiting, trying to hide. Nate and I shrug it off and look at each other, trying to act like we're not scared. We jump in, and I stare at the men in my rearview mirror. They have their guns pointing to us. We can't move because that's when they'll attack us in fear. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, we realise the men haven't taken their eyes off us now. We can't back up, given how close they are. I then noticed a fairly solid looking shoulder to the right of my road, and I decided to pull a quick U-turn to get away. So that's what I did. Turned the wheel and floored it. Thankfully my car was able to turn clear of theirs, and we drove as fast as we could down the login road. We didn't even bother looking behind us. Our dust plume hopefully was enough of a screen for them to not be able to follow us. I drove all the way to Idaho that night and had my eye on the rearview mirror the whole time.
Sometime around the beginning of July, I got off the bus in Boise, Idaho. When you get off the bus in downtown Boise, you're already near multiple shelters, the skate park, a miles-long bike trail, the library, the zoo, and also the river and woods. It's a really beautiful area, in spite of the overabundance of undesirable characters. The first night I was there, I went from the bus station to the skate park to a place called Piss Alley. At some point, a middle-aged lady pulled up and just randomly started talking to us for no reason. She wasn't a junkie and she had a job, yet she just stood there in Piss Alley and talked to us for an hour about religion and conspiracy. I was really high for the first time in about 10 months. A lot about her made me think she was just some kind of undercover, but I ultimately decided that she was just a little bit crazy. She had a job and a car, and was capable of carrying on an intellectual conversation. We really hit it off, even though we had just met. She asked me if I'd like to go camping with her and one of her girlfriends the next day. She definitely seemed more appealing than the street thug I was talking to, so I agreed to go with them. They were going to be leaving in the afternoon, and so she said I could come with her now, or she could go get me later, after she picked up her friend from work. She took me out to eat, and we hung out at the park until her friend got off work. They made sure they had a tent and sleeping bag for me, and we headed off to their favourite place to camp. Long story short, we went out there, we did camping things, and we had fun and came back. I didn't get chopped up into little pieces, but I also didn't get chopped up. It was about 11 PM when she dropped me back at the Piss Alley. As I was getting out, this tweaker with long dreads approached her car, and he was talking really fast. He said, "I'm not on drugs, I don't have any drugs. I've got a couple of bucks, I need friends, we need a ride. We need a ride across town, and we need a ride real quick." I had barely shut my door by the time he finished his pitch. My lady friend looked like she wanted to give him a ride, but she told him she couldn't. He didn't hesitate to retaliate that he had a couple of bucks, and he just needed a ride real quick. She started beating around the bush, explaining that her car was too full with camping gear. She couldn't even fit them in the car. One of his friends was a girl who looked to be about 15 or 16. He was definitely on drugs. I could tell because, well, so was I. He was starting to reword his pitch for a third time when I interrupted him, being sure that I had his eye. I bluntly told him, "Hey, no, she can't give you a ride." Then I waved her on, and she pulled away from the curb, leaving him and I looking at each other in the eyes. I could tell he was angry. I knew that in his mind, I had disrespected him. Right away, he fired off, "Who the hell are you? Is that your lady? Are you from around here? Do you know who I am? I'm TK. Everyone around here knows me. You must be brand new around here. You ask some people, they'll tell you. I run it around here." He went on to talk about how no one messes with him, and how he's got everything. He was talking about how he got shooters all over town, and he can just make a call and get someone to show up and kill me. I'm pretty used to people saying stupid stuff like that, and I didn't really act scared or impressed, but I didn't scoff or mock either. I bought 20 bucks worth of dope from him, thinking it might calm him down. He pulled out a big bag of dope. He gave me a tiny piece of dope in the palm of his hand. We stared each other down, and I asked him if he was serious. He yelled at me that what he gave me was all I would need. He was offended that I didn't trust him. A crowd had gathered, all of them staring at me with a look on their face that I knew meant they were waiting for me to make a wrong move. They all had his back. I put my knife on my hand, but ultimately I backed down. I propped the shard into my mouth like a little pill and swallowed it. This was going to end very badly. I was seething. I could glare, but I knew if I expressed my anger with any major outburst, it would result in me getting stomped. TK and his main few friends walked away about 15 yards, and stood talking in a small circle. After a few minutes, that girl came over and started flirting with me. I completely ignored her. This was an obvious trap. If he could make it look like I was disrespecting him further, by so much as talking to a girl or his sister, in front of these people, he could gain more of their support. There were about 20 people in the alley now. I was starting to feel slightly paranoid. That shard was starting to kick in. If I was rude to the girl, that could be just as bad, so I answered a couple of her small talk questions with simple nods. She abruptly quit trying to be cute and walked back over to TK where his friends were, and he was on the phone. Next, a really big guy who might have been about 40, and another guy who might have been about 20, came up to me and started talking to me. The young kid didn't really say anything the entire time. He just stood there with a glazed over look in his eyes, like he was ready to kill. The older guy was a fat, tall man with a red goatee. He talked to me about very mundane things and went back and forth from being very nice to giving me the same stare that the young guy gave me. I could tell he was trying to see if I was scared, and he was trying to see if I was an undercover cop. He was testing me in all kinds of ways, talking about crimes he committed in the past, and looking at me in a very intimidating, hateful way one second, then neutrally talking about the corner store in a cheerful manner the next second. The two of them talked to me, one on each side of me, with my back to the wall. They were closer to me than they should have been. Everybody else in the alley seemed to be oblivious to us, but there were the guys leaning against the wall at either end of the alley, just staring at us. I had 3 bags, one of which contained my laptop. I had cash on me, and I was wearing a nice leather jacket. I kept my hand on my knife the entire time. I was trying to be respectful, but also not look scared. I was starting to suspect that the shot I'd swallowed was actually bath salt, because on the inside I was tripping. TK walked over and set his bag down next to my bag, and started going through his pocket like he was looking for something in his bag. I was just trying to maintain eye contact with the big guy now. Now I had to make sure he wasn't going to go through my bag too. I knew something was going to happen as soon as it did. I planned on flipping my knife open and sticking him swiftly and repeatedly. If I could, I would try and keep TK between me and the big guy while I stabbed him. I'm good with a knife and can take hits, but if I had to fight now, 3-on-1 would only be the first stage. There would be 3 or 5 more rushing after me. The only thing that saved me is that I casually hinted that I need to go get money from a lady who owed me. Without saying it directly, I led them to believe that I not only have money on me, but I would come back with some, to buy more dope from them. Needless to say, I didn't plan on coming back. The rest of the night was very long, due to the effects of what I still believe were bath salts. I ran through the woods. I kept thinking I was being followed. I hid my bags in different places in the woods, so I could run without them if I had to. I was pretty scared, pretty sure I'd narrowly escaped with my life. I was so high. I came across a guy on the nature trail. He had a cloth bag in his hand, and I asked him what it was. He said it was just something he found on the trail, and then he threw it in the bushes. He was tweaked out like me. He seemed to sympathise as I told him the whole story of what just happened. He was going to take me somewhere safe, a camp where I could lay low. But I was unfamiliar with the area, so we were walking and talking, and the next thing I realised, we're heading right back to the piss alley, and we're about a block away. I yelled at him, and I was like, "What are you doing? I said I didn't want to come back here." He was saying that it was cool, he knew these people, and I was talking about how he could make everything okay by just telling them I was a good guy. I turned around and walked back into the woods. I went back to the area where he threw the bag. I found the bag and opened it. It was something of an adult nature. Randomly stopping to hide, stopping to listen to sounds for extended periods, and to try and figure out where they were. I came across another guy. He was about 20. In the end, he helped me keep safe. He took me to an island, where the river split around a piece of land underneath a bridge. I fell asleep there and woke up in the middle of the night to a random couple putting a blanket over me. I said thanks and went right back to sleep. After a couple of days, I got used to boys. I found out that TK had made national news. The same night I stopped him from getting in Christian lady's car. He convinced a couple of them to let him sleep in their apartment. I can just imagine him telling them, just like he told us, "I'm not on drugs, I don't have any drugs." At some point, he started acting really weird, cracked out. They planned on having their 3-year-old daughter's birthday party later that day, so they told him he had to leave, and he left. But then he came back and stabbed 9 people, 6 kids and 3 adults. One of those kids was a 3-year-old whose party it was. The people he was upset with weren't even there during the party, but he stabbed these kids anyway. He killed a 3-year-old at a birthday party. What a coward. Over the next 5 months, I got more acquainted with boys and this very weird junkie population. The people that had his back that night, most of them still miss him and acted like he never did anything wrong. When I went looking for details in his case, I just found out that he was getting into the needle, but the psychiatric had almost got him off the hook. He won't actually be tried by jury until 2020. That little girl is already dead. He should have been dead 6 months ago, right after it happened, or before it happened. I can't help but wonder that if it was fate that put me in the position that I could have taken him out, but I can't really think of it like that. Yeah, I might have saved that lady from getting in her car, but maybe I was supposed to get rid of him in that confrontation that never really escalated. I knew he was dangerous, I knew he was evil, but all I did was get myself out of the danger, and look what happened. In the future, if I'm ever put in a situation like that, I honestly don't know that I won't consider taking action to be doing the world a favour. What if I failed fate? How am I supposed to sleep now?
My husband and I went camping for the first time ever in Arizona as part of our long trip out west. I had picked out this really cool place. It was on a mountain overlooking a beautiful landscape. It's next to a cliff and in a really isolated location. I'm talking like 20 miles on gravel roads in the middle of a national forest. So, we get there, set up our tent, and hike a little bit and take pictures of the surrounding area. We see a few cars parked around 2 tents and decide to stop and talk to some of the other campers nearby because we heard that there was going to be a bad storm that night. These were 4 guys who are from Arizona telling us not to worry about the storm. That was all persuading. We felt okay and decided to stay. Later on, we were walking a bit further down the campsite. We see a woman there with her dog and another older lady. We smile and wave. We continue to hike down a bit further into the forest. Now let me elaborate that because of the storm, we are one among maybe a total of 7 campers that decide to stay and withstand the night. We watch the sunset when we get back to our campsite. Make sure our car was only a few yards away, getting into our tent when it gets dark. There are no stars out tonight. Due to the storm clouds, and it hasn't begun to rain yet, so we decide to try and sleep right away so that we could possibly sleep through the storm when it does hit. It's an insanely windy night, so it's hard to sleep, but eventually we get a bit of shut-eye. I wake up at 10:30 to the sound of some crazy thunder rolling through the mountains and rain hitting down on our tent. I'm a little freaked out because they get a lot of flash floods here, and I don't want to fall off a cliff. But I tell myself try and sleep, and eventually I doze off again. It's 12 AM now, and I'm awake again. This time because I hear something heavy hitting the side of our tent. Full on like the sound of somebody punching the side, trying to tear it down. I open my eyes. I can't see anything. It's completely dark. No light whatsoever. The sound continues every couple of minutes and now I'm terrified. Suddenly, I hear footsteps right to the next of my tent. They are slow but steady. I feel my entire body freeze. I'm seriously starting to think about how weird it is and that I'm gonna die. My heart is beating so fast that I am certain that whatever it is out there can hear me. Then, whatever it is lets out a deep sigh right on the opposite side of the tent. I'm thinking it's a bear and realising that I may actually have to face this thing. So, in a desperate call for my husband's mind-reading powers, I squeeze his hand really hard and he wakes up. Instead of reading my mind, he says, "What's wrong? Why are you squeezing my hand?" Right as he says this, the footsteps stop. I don't hear the footsteps again. So after a while, I break out of my frozen state and tell him what I heard. We decide it may be an animal passing by, but whoever it is hitting our tent continuously every so often. I feel like I'm starting to go a little insane from this night, wondering what's going on. We convince ourselves that it's just pines falling from the trees above and try and sleep again. We just need to make it through one night. Now a couple of minutes go by and suddenly the tent caves in on my husband's side, right on his head. He whispers that it feels like something's pushing down inside the tent. I feel my heart instantly sink. I'm freaking out, thinking it's a bear that just sat on his head, but he decides to push back. We hear the same sound on the other side that we heard before. We realise it's been snowing outside, and the noise could be heavy ice. We're determined to make it through the night, a little relieved that we think it's just ice and not a bear. We decide to try and make it to sunrise. We kept on a small light that my husband luckily brought with him to calm us down. Things seem to be back to normal. We try and sleep. It's 3 AM now. Not even half an hour goes by that my worst nightmare happens. Out of the pitch black, we hear someone screaming. We both say, "What the hell?" We then hear someone scream out, "No, please stop and help." The way that she screamed doesn't sound like anger, but pure terror. My husband and I are both froze looking at each other. I quickly shut off our light and start panicking, asking what we should do because what's happening? While we're trying to decide what to do, we hear it again. She's screaming no. We then hear a car speed off. At this point, we're in tears. We have no idea what's happening. It's deadly silent now, save from the icy rain hitting our tent. It definitely sounded like she wasn't in the car, but more like she was desperately yelling after being hurt. This is breaking point now, because I could take the bad weather. I could take the possibility of a bear, but not somebody potentially dying out there. We decide to get the hell out of there, and even contemplate leaving our tent and booking it to the car, but we instead tried to stay level-headed and grab our valuables, putting them in the car first. We frantically gather our things, stay close as we shuffle to our car. I close the door and keep the lights off for a while, scared to attract any unwelcome visitors. And while my husband goes back to grab the tent, I call 911. I start the car. I tell them what's happened and they're sending someone to our campsite to make sure everything's okay. Only thing is, we're in literally the middle of nowhere and it will definitely take them more than an hour to get here at least. Not to mention, the storm left those gravel roads in terrible conditions. So my husband and I decide to start driving. It's 3:30 now. As we drive out of the campsite, my husband notices one last eerie detail that stuck with me. The 4 guys that we had talked to earlier had left. All 3 of their cars were gone while their tents remained. Whatever scared them off, they sure left in a hurry. It was only after we started driving that it occurred to me. Whatever was walking next to my tent was not an animal. It's probably someone looking in the dark, lurking for a victim. This terrifies me. I'm not quite sure what went down there. I just hope everyone got out okay.
Back in 2011, I was within a circle of friends that made it tradition to go camping at a certain spot every May long weekend. The spot we chose was in a beautiful area, right on the edge of the large lake, and was located on government land. The lake itself had a dam on it, so during May long, the water levels were always low, if not completely empty, making it possible to walk across it. People were allowed to camp there as long as they weren't causing any trouble or making a mess, and it was generally a good time for everyone. The spot themselves was spaced far enough apart that you had your own privacy, but not far enough that you couldn't meet other people. In this particular year, our spot was in the middle of a small hill, with one campsite below us and one above us. The first night of our trip happened without incident. During the second day, the people were staying at the site below us had just moved in. We didn't think much of it, and continued drinking throughout the day and into the night. At around midnight, the people at the campsite below us were really out of control. They were yelling and screaming, and their music had gotten even louder, so our friend Ben went down to ask them to turn it down. He was promptly punched in the face, and came back to inform us that he was 9% sure they were on drugs. After that, the vibe wasn't as relaxed, and we were all somewhat on edge. I was feeling really tired, so I just decided to go to bed. Some of my friends were still awake, including Ben, and one couple, Lily and Derek, that were visiting another campsite we'd made friends with that day. I could hear the camp below us still blasting the music and partying pretty hard, but I just tried to ignore it and sleep. I don't know what time it was when I jolted awake. Parts of this are somewhat a blur. All I know is that I sat up straight as soon as I heard the screaming and yelling coming from outside my tent. I quickly ran outside to find a campsite in chaos. One of my friends was clutching their chest. People were running around and screaming to call 911. I was quickly informed what happened. Apparently, not long after I'd gone to bed, the people camping at the site below us decided they weren't finished talking to Ben, and on their way up, they had encountered Lily and Derek walking back. Now Derek and Ben are about the same height and have the same colour hair, so they assumed that Derek was Ben and bowled him and Lily over the head with a full glass bottle. I don't know if it was the same guys that showed up to our campsite, but I was told that everyone else was sitting around the fire when 2 or 3 huge guys appeared from the darkness and walked over to them. One had a paring knife and the other had a butcher's knife in their hand. Ben saw the knives and had gotten up to talk to them, and barely spoken a word when the guy with the paring knife stabbed him once in the chest. At the same time, some people from the campsite above had just seen the guys coming back and down to help. One of them guys, Tim, was coming down the hill when the guy with the butcher's knife ran up to him and stabbed him in the stomach. From there, sheer panic ensued. People called 911, but the ambulance was over half an hour away. This is where I came out the tent. Tim's wound was bleeding profusely, and he was losing blood too quickly. His friends ended up putting him in the back of his car and speeding off to meet the ambulance halfway. Ben was also bleeding, but his wound wasn't as deep as Tim's, and we were able to keep him calm until the ambulance arrived. The guys with the knives ran off into the darkness, back down to their campsite, and took off in their Land Rover. My boyfriend at the time had got into his car and drove to the entrance to try and flag down the policemen on their way back to the scene. Once they arrived, we were informed to stay in the car, as they had released a K9 search unit to hunt down the people who stabbed their friends. By the end of the night, they had arrested the men. They had tried to flee by driving their vehicle across the lake bed, where they got stuck in a muddy section of the lake. They were on a concoction of several drugs as suspected. Luckily, both Tim and Ben survived, though Tim had lost a lot of blood and took a few weeks to recover from his wounds. Derek and Lily had huge goose heads, and possibly one person had a concussion, but I can't recall. It was definitely the scariest thing that I've ever experienced, and a few of us had to testify against them in court. I just found this sub, and I have quite a few stories. I live in rural western Pennsylvania. There's a mix of everyone out here. Punks, meth heads, potheads, Bible thumpers, all in our area. I'm the kind of guy who wants to help. Just the other day, I stopped with some random guy on the highway, looking a little lost. The encounter was more pleasant anyway. Back when I was 16, fresh to the world, I was driving to work, and there was an older lady, grey and confused, looking at the gas station right behind my work. I pulled up and asked her if anything was wrong. She was visibly distracted and confused. She started rambling about her kids in the truck. The heat wasn't working. She needed to help them get to their dad. A bunch of stuff. I asked her if she had talked to anyone at the gas station, and that I had pulled over to help her go if she was uncomfortable. She must have taken that as a ticket to get in my car. She opened the door, sat down, and looked at me with a moment of clarity and said, "Drive," as she hit the power locks on the door. I was stunned. Not physically intimidated, but just taken aback by how forceful it was. After a second equal oomph, I said, "Miss, I'm sorry, but get out." She looked at me again and said, "No, drive." I replied again, "Get out my car." With that, she slipped out of intent and went back to her confused rant on the other side of the road. Who knows where the hell she wanted me to drive, but I wasn't cool with going wherever she wanted me to go.